The Saturday sun was merciless, blazing down on the small community baseball field in Austin, Texas. The red dirt shimmered, the bleachers baked, and the sound of children's laughter rose like a tide above the drone of cicadas. Parents sat with folding chairs and styrofoam cups of iced tea, calling encouragement to boys and girls who looked comically small in their oversized uniforms. Andrew Miller didn't belong here. That much was obvious from the moment he stepped out of his sleek black sedan and walked across the gravel lot. He was overdressed, dark jeans, leather shoes, a crisp polo that had never seen a day of grass stains. A Rolex flashed at his wrist whenever he lifted a hand to shield his eyes from the sun. If anyone had recognized him, they hadn't approached. Most of the parents were too focused on their kids, and Andrew wasn't in the mood for small talk anyway. He told himself he was here out of curiosity, maybe nostalgia. The truth was less comfortable. He had nowhere else to be. A meeting had been cancelled at the last minute, leaving him unmoored, restless. Somehow his car had carried him past this park, and he had pulled in without thinking. He climbed the bleachers, scanning the field without really seeing it until his gaze snagged on a small figure on the pitcher's mound. The girl was 7. Maybe 8, her ponytail poking stubbornly out of the back of her cap. She set her jaw with fierce determination, wound her arm back and threw. The ball sailed across the plate, fast and clean. The crowd cheered. Andrew froze. It wasn't just that she had talent. It was the way she moved, the tilt of her shoulder, the snap of her wrist. The exact mechanics he remembered from his own boyhood games, when coaches had praised his natural throw. Watching her was like watching an echo of himself. The catcher's mitt popped. The little girl grinned, stomping a foot in delight as her teammates shouted. She tipped her cap back, and sunlight caught her eyes. Grey, storm cloud grey. His eyes, Andrew's breath, caught in his throat. He didn't notice the heat anymore. Didn't notice the parents around him. All he could see was the child with his eyes and his throw, and then he heard the voice, "Go, Madison. That's my girl." The woman calling encouragement stood behind the dugout fence, hands cupped around her mouth. Her hair was darker now, pulled back in a practical braid, and her face carried the tired grace of someone who worked too hard and slept too little. But the moment Andrew saw her, his heart lurched. Claire. 8 years vanished in an instant. She was exactly as he remembered, and nothing like it all at once. Older, yes, stronger, but still, Claire the only woman who had ever mattered. Andrew gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. He had imagined this reunion countless times, rehearsed apologies, explanations, declarations, but never like this. Never with a little girl on the mound who looked like him. Claire's laughter floated across the field, warm and bright as she clapped for the child, and Andrew knew. The truth hit him harder than any boardroom defeat or financial loss ever had. That was his daughter. He stumbled down the bleachers, his pulse thundering in his ears. For once, his usual certainty abandoned him. What did he say? "Hello, Claire, by the way, is that our child?" No script existed for this. Claire turned as if she sensed him. Her eyes locked on his across the field. Shock, recognition, then something colder, defense, steel. She stiffened, her hand immediately finding the girl's shoulder as Madison skipped off the mound. Andrew stopped short, the air between them vibrating with unspoken history. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse, her lips parted, then pressed together again. She adjusted Madison's cap, shielding her with a subtle tilt of her body. "Mum," the girl asked, tugging on Claire's sleeve. "Who's that man?" Andrew's chest constricted. The innocence in Madison's voice nearly undid him. "No one, sweetheart," Claire said quickly, her tone gentle but firm. "Just someone I used to know." The words sliced through him. Andrew wanted to argue with her denial, to blurt the truth in front of everyone, but his throat closed around the words. Madison was still looking at him, her grey eyes wide and curious. She tilted her head in the exact way he did when puzzling over a problem. He nearly laughed at the absurdity of it proof written in gestures no DNA test could contest. But Claire's gaze stopped him. Her expression was a fortress, all sharp angles and cold warning. He remembered that look. It was the same one she wore the night she walked out, when she had decided nothing he said could change her mind. Madison tugged again. "Mum, are we going for ice cream after?" Claire forced a smile, softening only for her daughter. "Of course, honey. You pitched so well you've earned it." Andrew's chest tightened. He had missed this, missed the rituals of small celebrations, the casual affection that came with parenting. All the billions in his accounts couldn't buy back those moments. He cleared his throat, stepping closer. "Claire, please. I just want to talk." "Not here," she snapped under her breath. Her eyes flicked round the bleachers, aware of curious parents pretending not to watch. "Not now." Andrew nodded once, swallowing the frustration rising in him. He had built empires on persistence. He wasn't about to retreat now. The game wrapped up, kids gathering gloves and water bottles, coaches giving high fives. Claire busied herself with Madison's backpack, keeping her body between Andrew and her daughter. Every movement screamed, "Stay away," but Madison, ever observant, noticed anyway. She peeked around her mother's side and waved a tiny hand at Andrew, shy but friendly. Andrew's heart nearly broke. He lifted his own hand, returning the gesture with a tentative smile. Claire caught it. Her jaw clenched. "Let's go, Mads." They walked toward a faded Toyota parked at the edge of the lot. Andrew followed at a distance, torn between caution and desperation. When Claire buckled Madison into the back seat, she spun on him. "You don't get to just show up," she hissed. "I didn't know," Andrew said, the words tumbling out. "I swear, Claire, I didn't know about her." Her eyes blazed. "And if you had, what would you have done, Andrew? Skipped one meeting? Cut one deal short? Don't pretend the man you were could have been a father." He flinched because she was right. The man he had been would have chosen the boardroom every time. But looking at Madison's curious face through the car window, Andrew knew he wasn't that man anymore. "People change," he whispered. Claire's laugh was bitter. "Not you." She slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The Toyota rattled to life, pulling away in a puff of exhaust. Madison pressed her palm against the back window as they drove off, her small hand a silent question mark. Andrew stood in the dust, breathless, as the taillights disappeared down the street. That night, Andrew sat in his penthouse, staring at the city skyline. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. His reflection in the glass looked hollow, a man surrounded by everything except what mattered. 8 years ago, he had convinced himself Claire would come back, that she just needed space, that once he proved himself, once the company succeeded, she'd see he was right. But she hadn't come back. And now he understood why. He leaned forward, pressing his palms to his face. He had lost her, maybe forever. But the child, Madison, That was different. He had missed the first years, yes, but he refused to miss the rest. Meanwhile, Claire parked in her driveway, killing the engine with shaking hands. Madison unbuckled herself and hopped out, still glowing from the game. "Mum, that man really wanted to talk to you," she said innocently. "Why didn't you talk back?" Claire forced a steady tone. "Because some people don't belong in our lives, Madison. Not everyone who shows up is meant to stay." But he looked at me like he knew me. Claire swallowed hard. Children noticed too much. She crouched to meet her daughter's eyes. "All you need to know is that you are loved, okay? You're safe. That's what matters." Madison nodded, but her brow furrowed. He had eyes like mine. Claire's heart lurched. She kissed her daughter's forehead, deflecting with a smile. "You're special, sweetheart. Your eyes are your own." But as she tucked Madison into bed later that night, Claire couldn't shake the memory of Andrew's face when he saw their daughter. It hadn't been greed or arrogance. It had been raw, undeniable longing. Sleep didn't come easily to Claire that night. She lay in bed long after Madison's breathing settled into the steady rhythm of dreams, staring at the ceiling while shadows shifted with the headlights passing outside. For years, she had imagined what she would say if she ever saw Andrew again. Sometimes in her mind she screamed at him, threw every betrayal back in his face. Other times she stayed silent, stone cold, watching him squirm. But she had never, not once, imagined facing him with Madison by her side. It terrified her, because Madison was curious, and because Andrew, damn him, had looked at their daughter with a kind of love Claire wasn't sure she could shield against. She rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket tighter. "I won't let him hurt her," she whispered into the dark. It was a promise as much to herself as to her child. Andrew didn't sleep either. He paced his penthouse like a caged animal, phone in hand, drafting texts to Claire he never sent. "Please, just let me explain. I didn't know. I want to know her. I've changed." Each message was deleted, replaced, deleted again. Words felt useless. Claire would never believe them. He stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The city glittered below his kingdom, his empire. For so long, it had been enough, proof of who he was. But tonight, it mocked him, because what good was a kingdom when his blood, his daughter, didn't even know his name? He pressed his forehead to the glass. He couldn't erase the past, but maybe he could write a different future. And for the first time in years, Andrew Miller felt something unfamiliar, fear. The next morning, Claire tried to return to routine. She made pancakes, helped Madison with her homework, pretended not to notice the questions her daughter wanted to ask but didn't. At the grocery store, Madison spotted a father pushing a cart with a little boy in the seat. She watched them, thoughtful, before tugging on Claire's hand. "Mum, did I ever have a dad?" Claire's stomach dropped. She bent down, busying herself with tying Madison's shoelace, though it wasn't undone. "You have everything you need, sweetheart. You have me." Madison's eyes narrowed, skeptical in a way too old for her age. "But other kids have dads." Claire forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Every family looks different. Ours is perfect the way it is." But even as she said it, Claire knew the truth. Their family wasn't perfect anymore. Not with Andrew suddenly back in the picture. The neat little walls she had built around their lives were cracking. That evening, Andrew showed up at the ballpark again. He stayed in his car this time, watching from a distance. He told himself he wasn't stalking, just observing, making sure Madison was real, not a dream. She ran the bases with an energy that made his chest ache. She had his determination, his stride, even the way she clenched her fists when she wanted to win, and when she laughed. Andrew realized something devastating. He had never known a purer sound. For the first time in his life, business meetings could wait. Deals could fail. Stocks could plummet. None of it mattered, because nothing was more important than that little girl. Claire spotted him as she loaded the gear into her car. Even from across the lot, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the stubborn tilt of his chin. Her pulse spiked. Anger warred with something more dangerous, an ache she thought she had buried years ago. She slammed the trunk shut, her movements sharp. If he thought he could waltz back into their lives, he was mistaken. But as she buckled Madison in, her daughter whispered, "Mum, he's here again." Claire froze. Madison had seen him too. He waved. Madison added softly, "Should I wave back?" Claire's throat tightened. She didn't answer right away, because, for the first time, she wasn't sure what the right answer was. The week after the game, Claire threw herself into work with a kind of manic energy. She scheduled extra shifts at the hospital, filled the calendar with playdates for Madison, signed up for a weekend science fair, anything to keep her daughter busy, distracted, occupied. But children weren't so easily redirected. "Mum," Madison asked one night as they ate takeout at the kitchen table, "why did that man keep looking at me?" Claire's fork froze midair. The fried rice cooled on her plate as she searched for an answer that wouldn't shatter the fragile balance she had built. "Some people look at kids because they see themselves," she said carefully. "Maybe he thought you reminded him of someone." Madison chewed thoughtfully, like a daughter. The question hit like a fist. Claire forced a laugh, shaking her head. "No, sweetheart. Don't be silly." But Madison wasn't convinced. She narrowed her grey eyes, so achingly familiar, and Claire had to turn away before her composure cracked. Meanwhile, Andrew was running out of patience. He had promised himself he would respect Claire's boundaries, that he would give her space. But space felt unbearable when it meant missing more of Madison's life. He sat in his office during a board meeting, the numbers on the screen blurring as his mind replayed her smile, the way she sprinted across the bases. His executives were arguing about quarterly earnings, but Andrew couldn't bring himself to care. For the first time in years, profit margins didn't matter. "Andrew, do you have thoughts on the projections?" one of the VPs asked nervously. Andrew blinked. Normally, he would have launched into a detailed strategy, but all he could manage was a curt, "We'll review later." Meeting adjourned. His team exchanged shocked glances as he strode out. Andrew Miller never cut a meeting short, until now. He found himself parked near Claire's neighborhood a few days later, engine idling. It was reckless, maybe even pathetic, but he couldn't stay away. Then he saw her. Claire, walking Madison down the sidewalk, the girl wobbling uncertainly on a bicycle with training wheels. Madison's laugh rang out when the bike tipped slightly, and Claire steadied her with a gentle hand. Andrew's chest ached. He wanted to be the one running beside her, the one catching her when she fell. And then it happened. Madison lost balance, the bike tipping too far. Claire reached, but she was carrying grocery bags and couldn't grab in time. Andrew was out of the car before he realized it. He sprinted across the street, catching the handlebars just before Madison toppled onto the pavement. The girl gasped, startled, then looked up at him. "You saved me," Andrew knelt, steadying the bike. You did most of it yourself. Just needed a little backup. Madison's grin was radiant. Thanks, Mr. Claire's voice cut like a whip. Andrew, he rose slowly, meeting her glare. She was falling. I had it under control. Andrew glanced at the scraped knee forming on Madison's leg. Did you? Claire bristled, torn between fury and the undeniable truth. Madison, oblivious to the tension, bounced on her toes. Mum, he helped. He's nice. Claire's heart sank. This was exactly what she had feared. Claire pulled Madison gently toward her, crouching to check the scrape on her knee. It wasn't serious, just a red mark, but she fussed over it anyway, using the moment to put space between her daughter and Andrew. You're okay, she murmured, brushing dirt from Madison's shin. We'll clean it up at home. Madison, however, wasn't paying attention. She leaned sideways, peeking around her mother's shoulder. Are you coming to my next game? She asked Andrew brightly. The question hit Claire like ice water. She stood so fast, Madison blinked in surprise. He won't be at your game, Claire said firmly. Andrew straightened, hands sliding into his pockets as if to keep them from shaking. Maybe she wants me there. Claire spun on him. Don't put words in her mouth. Madison frowned, confused by the sharpness in her mother's voice. She glanced between them, sensing something important was being hidden. Andrew dropped his gaze, exhaling. I'm not trying to confuse her, Claire. I want to be part of her life. Claire's laugh was brittle. Part of her life? You don't even know what that means. I'm willing to learn. Claire stared at him, stunned. The Andrew she had known never admitted ignorance, never asked for guidance. He had always been the man with the answers, the plan, the unshakable confidence. And yet, standing in front of her now, he looked almost human, too human. She shook her head. It's not that simple. The rest of the walk home was a silent battle. Madison pushed her bike between them, humming softly to herself, while Claire and Andrew exchanged sharp glances over her head. When they reached the driveway, Claire turned to face him fully. You need to stop showing up like this. It isn't fair to her. It isn't fair to me, either, Andrew shot back, voice low but intense. 8 years, Claire. You kept her from me for 8 years. Claire's breath caught. The raw accusation stung, even though she had rehearsed all the justifications in her head. You think you would have been there? She hissed. Do you even remember what your life looked like back then? You wouldn't have made it to her first steps, her first words. You wouldn't have cared. Andrew's jaw tightened. Don't tell me what I would or wouldn't have cared about. You didn't give me the chance. Claire folded her arms, her whole body a barricade. And I'd do it again. For a long moment, the only sound was Madison struggling to wrestle her bike onto the lawn. She looked up, sensing the storm but not understanding it. Her little face caught between curiosity and unease. Andrew softened instantly at the sight. She deserves the truth, he whispered. Claire flinched, because deep down she knew he was right. 8 years earlier, the loft smelled faintly of printer ink and stale coffee. Claire sat on the couch in her pajamas, a paperback forgotten in her lap. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, and still Andrew wasn't home. She tried to be patient. She told herself he was closing another deal, that the late nights were temporary, but the excuses were growing thin. They had been growing thin for a long time. When the door finally opened, Andrew came in with his tie undone and his phone pressed to his ear. His laptop bag dangled from one hand, his voice sharp as he argued with someone about projections and investors. "Can you hang up for 1 minute?" Claire asked, rising to her feet. He muttered a clipped goodbye, then shoved the phone into his pocket. "Claire, not tonight, please. I just closed. Soul, it's huge. This is everything we've been working toward." She stared at him, searching for the boy she'd fallen in love with, the one who used to make her laugh in lecture halls, who once drove her across the state just to watch the stars. All she saw now was a man she hardly recognized, lit more by ambition than love. "When was the last time we ate dinner together?" she whispered. Andrew dropped his bag, running a hand through his hair. "I told you, this is temporary. Once the company stabilizes, you've been saying that for years." Her voice cracked. "I don't need a company, Andrew. I need you." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Finally, he said, "If you can't understand what I'm building, maybe you don't understand me at all." Her heart broke, not from the words themselves, but from the certainty behind them. He meant it. She grabbed her suitcase, already packed, waiting by the door. His eyes widened when he realized, but he didn't move. "Goodbye, Andrew," she whispered. She waited for him to stop her, to fight. But he didn't. He just stood there as she walked out into the storm. Weeks later, Claire stared at the little plastic stick in her hand, her knees drawn to her chest on the bathroom floor. 2 pink lines glared up at her. Her laugh was bitter through the tears. The timing was cruel just when she had severed herself from Andrew. A part of him had taken root inside her. Her first instinct was to call him, to hear his voice, to tell him the truth. But then she remembered the look on his face that night. Ambition brighter than love. She placed a trembling hand over her stomach. "It's you and me now," she whispered. It was the hardest decision she had ever made. But it gave her purpose. Years blurred into a collage of exhaustion and joy. Claire worked 2 jobs at one point. Days at the clinic, nights waiting tables just to keep the bills paid. She stretched every dollar, learned to cook on pennies, sold jewelry she had once cherished, but the struggles paled beside the light Madison brought. Her laugh, her stubborn streak, the way she hugged with her whole body, those things made every sacrifice worth it. Claire remembered the first time Madison toddled across the living room, her wobbly legs carrying her straight into her mother's arms. Claire had cried, holding her daughter close, whispering, "We're going to be okay. We'll always be okay," even on the darkest nights, when she lay awake wondering how she would cover rent. One glance at Madison's sleeping face gave her the strength to keep going in the present. Claire sometimes wondered how she had survived those early years. There had been nights when she'd eaten nothing so Madison could have enough, mornings when she'd gone to work on 3 hours of sleep, yet she never regretted the choice. Her daughter was her anchor, her reason, her joy. She leaned on friends when she could, but mostly it had been her and Madison against the world, and in a strange way that had made their bond unshakable. Madison trusted her completely. That trust was sacred, and Claire would burn down the world before letting Andrew shatter it. Still, seeing him again had rattled her. He wasn't supposed to look at Madison that way, with awe, with longing. He wasn't supposed to smile when Madison laughed, or move without hesitation to steady her bike. Claire told herself it was an act, a performance from the same man who could charm investors and silence rivals with a glance. But deep down, in the place she didn't like to admit existed, she knew better. He had looked like a father, and that terrified her more than his indifference ever had, across town. Andrew sat alone in his penthouse, the skyline glittering beneath him. For years, this view had been enough proof of his success, a monument to the empire he'd built from nothing. Now it felt hollow. He remembered the night Claire left, as if it were etched into his bones, the rain hammering against the windows, the suitcase by the door, her eyes when she said goodbye. He had told himself she'd come back once she saw he was right, once he proved himself. But she hadn't, and he had buried himself in work, pretending he didn't care. But he cared now. God, he cared. Every memory of Madison replayed in his mind like a film reel, the determined way she wound up for a pitch, the shy smile when she asked if he'd seen her strikeout. He had missed 8 years, 8 birthdays, 8 Christmases, 8 firsts he could never get back, and the thought gutted him. Andrew poured a glass of whiskey, but he didn't drink it. He set it aside and sank onto the couch, his hands covering his face. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how to win. Deals he could close, rivals he could outmaneuver, but this, earning the trust of a child who didn't know him, and a woman who no longer believed in him. It felt impossible, yet he couldn't walk away. He wouldn't. Andrew Miller had built empires on persistence, and he would use that same persistence now for a company. Not for wealth, but for a little girl with storm-grey eyes. Meanwhile, Claire sat at the kitchen table after putting Madison to bed, bills scattered around her. The numbers blurred as her thoughts circled back to Andrew. She had spent years convincing herself he didn't care, that walking away had been easy for him. That belief had kept her strong, righteous in her decision. But the way he looked at Madison, the way he caught her before she fell it, didn't look easy. It looked like a man carrying the weight of every mistake he had ever made. Claire pressed her palms against her eyes. She couldn't let him in. She wouldn't, but she also couldn't ignore the truth forever, and she hated him for making her doubt. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Claire brewed coffee in the small kitchen, the scent filling the bungalow. Madison padded in, hair sticking out in every direction, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Morning, Mum," she mumbled, climbing onto a chair. Claire smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Morning, sweetheart. Pancakes today." Madison perked up immediately. "With chocolate chips?" "Always." For a while, the routine was enough to calm Claire's racing mind. Batter sizzling in the pan, Madison humming as she colored at the table, sunlight pooling across the floor. These were the moments Claire lived. For the ordinary, the steady, the safe. But safety felt fragile now, as if one wrong move could shatter it. Across town, Andrew tried to bury himself in work. He sat through meetings, reviewed contracts, nodded at presentations. But every time a colleague spoke, he heard Madison's voice instead. Every slide blurred into the image of her eyes. So much like his, by lunchtime he gave up, dismissing the board with a sharp, "We'll revisit this tomorrow." He walked out of the building into the sharp autumn air, loosening his tie. For once, he had no appetite for the life he'd built. What he wanted was something he couldn't schedule, couldn't buy, couldn't command with authority. He wanted to know his daughter that evening. Claire and Madison curled on the couch with a movie. Madison giggled at the cartoon characters, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. Claire held her close, breathing in the scent of shampoo and popcorn. "Mom," Madison asked suddenly. "Yes, baby. Do you think that man will come back?" Claire's heart lurched. She kept her eyes on the screen, voice calm. I don't know. Madison was quiet for a beat. Then, I kind of hope he does. Claire blinked back tears. She pressed a kiss to Madison's hair, whispering, "You have everything you need right here." But Madison's words echoed long after she fell asleep. Later, Claire stepped out onto the porch, the night air cool against her skin. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she and Andrew had once watched together as college kids. Back then, everything had felt possible. Back then, she had believed him when he promised her forever. Now, forever looked different. She didn't know if Andrew could ever truly change. She didn't know if she could forgive him. But Madison's longing was clear, and Claire's resolve, once unshakable, was starting to crack. Meanwhile, Andrew stood on his balcony, city lights glittering below. He pulled out his phone, typing and deleting message after message. "I want to see her again. She deserves to know the truth. Please, Claire." Finally, he sent nothing. Instead, he whispered into the night, as if Madison could somehow hear, "I'm not going anywhere this time." Claire closed her eyes on the porch, whispering to herself, "I won't let him hurt her." And yet, in her chest, a quiet voice she couldn't silence asked the question she dreaded most. What if letting him in doesn't hurt her at all? The following week, Andrew tried something different. Instead of appearing at the ballpark or on the sidewalk, he sent a simple envelope to Claire's mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note, no company letterhead, no flashy signature, just words in his own uneven script. "Claire, I know I've earned your anger. I can't undo the past, but I don't want to steal the future from her. If you'll allow it, I'd like a chance to prove I can be there for Madison. I won't push. I'll follow your rules. Just one chance." Claire read the note 3 times at the kitchen counter, her fingers trembling. She wanted to rip it up, burn it, pretend it had never arrived. But something in the rawness of the handwriting stopped her. Andrew never wrote things by hand. He typed, dictated, delegated. The uneven letters looked vulnerable. Madison padded in, carrying her school backpack. "What's that, Mum?" "Nothing," Claire said too quickly, shoving the note into a drawer. Madison's eyes narrowed in suspicion, but she let it go. 2 days later, Andrew showed up at the community center where Madison's class was hosting a science fair. He didn't march up to them. He stayed at the back, quietly watching as Madison explained her volcano project to a group of parents. She spotted him anyway. Her face lit up, and before Claire could stop her, she ran across the gym floor. "You came," Madison exclaimed. Andrew crouched down, grinning. Wouldn't miss it. Claire's heart sank as she hurried after her daughter. "Madison, we've talked about this," but Madison was already pulling Andrew toward her project. "Look, it really erupts. I put extra baking soda." The volcano hissed and bubbled, foam spilling over the sides. Andrew clapped like it was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. "That's brilliant." Claire froze, the protest dying on her tongue. Madison's joy was too radiant, too unfiltered, and Andrew, he wasn't pretending. His pride looked real. On the drive home, Madison couldn't stop talking. He said it was brilliant, Mum. He actually watched the whole thing. "Did you see him clapping?" "I saw," Claire said tightly, gripping the steering wheel. Madison tilted her head. "Why don't you like him?" Claire's breath caught. She forced calm. "It's not about liking or not liking, sweetheart. Some people just don't belong in our lives, but he feels like he belongs. Madison whispered. Claire had no answer for that. That night, Andrew stood outside their house in the dark, engine off, watching the lights flicker off one by one. He wasn't stalking, he told himself. He was waiting for courage, for permission, for a sign that he wasn't too late. Inside, Madison pressed her face to the window, spotting the faint outline of his car. She didn't say anything, but she smiled. Claire tried to shut it down. The next morning, she told Madison firmly that Andrew wouldn't be around anymore. But why? Madison asked, sitting at the breakfast table with a bowl of cereal. Because I said so. Claire replied, harsher than she meant. Madison's spoon clattered against the bowl. That's not fair. He's nice. He listens. Claire froze. The word struck deeper than she expected. He listens. Was that what Madison thought she didn't do? Claire forced a smile. Sweetheart, sometimes people seem nice, but they've hurt us before. I don't want them to hurt you. Madison's brow furrowed. Maybe he's different now. The innocence in her voice was unbearable. Claire turned away, blinking back tears. That afternoon, Andrew showed up again, not at their door, but at the school library, where he knew Madison's class had reading hour. He asked permission from the teacher, offering to read a story. When Madison saw him walk in with a book under his arm, her face lit up brighter than the fluorescent lights overhead. Can he really read to us? She asked eagerly. The teacher nodded, surprised but pleased. Of course, Mr. Miller, the floor is yours. Andrew sat in the rocking chair, holding the book awkwardly at first. He was more comfortable in front of shareholders than second graders. But then Madison scooted closer, her eyes fixed on him, and something shifted. He read with surprising warmth, stumbling through the voices of silly animals, pausing to let the kids giggle. Madison laughed the loudest, clapping at the end. Claire arrived early to pick her up and froze at the sight of Andrew, surrounded by children. Madison leaning against his knee. For a moment, she saw something she'd never allowed herself to imagine. Andrew as a father. And worse, he looked like he belonged. That night, Claire confronted him outside the library. You can't keep inserting yourself into her life, she hissed. Andrew met her gaze steadily. I'm not inserting myself. I'm showing up. That's what fathers do. You don't get to call yourself that, she snapped. His expression faltered, pain flickering in his eyes. She already does, Claire. Not out loud, maybe, but in the way she looks at me. I can feel it. Claire shook her head, refusing to let the words sink in. But deep down, she knew he wasn't wrong. That weekend, Madison practiced riding her bike without training wheels. She wobbled down the street, arms flailing, until Andrew, who had been jogging nearby, caught the seat and steadied her. You've got it, he said gently. Just keep pedaling. Madison beamed, focusing on his voice, and for a moment, she forgot Claire was even there. Claire's chest tightened as she watched her daughter lean into Andrew's encouragement. It wasn't just admiration. It was trust, and trust was dangerous. The afternoon sun slanted low as Madison made another attempt down the sidewalk, her hair flying behind her. She wobbled, steadied, then suddenly she was riding on her own, pedaling fast and straight. I did it, she shouted. Andrew jogged beside her, laughing. Yes, you did. I knew you could, Madison squealed with delight, throwing her arms in the air and nearly tipping over again. Andrew caught her handlebars just in time, steadying her before she fell. Claire hurried up from the porch, her heart hammering. She wanted to be the one her daughter looked to, the one catching her. But when Madison hopped off the bike, breathless and glowing, she turned to Andrew first. "Did you see that, Dad?" The words slipped out like lightning, natural and unthinking. Madison froze, realization dawning, cheeks flushing pink. Andrew went still. For a moment, the world narrowed to a single word reverberating in his chest. "Dad." He swallowed hard, blinking back the burn in his eyes. Claire's stomach dropped. The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. "Madison," she said sharply, though her voice wavered, "go inside. Wash up for dinner." Madison looked between them, suddenly nervous. "I didn't mean go," Claire repeated, softer this time, with a small nod. Madison pushed her bike onto the lawn and slipped inside the house. Leaving silence in her wake, Claire turned on Andrew, fury and fear warring in her eyes. "Do you see what you've done?" Andrew's voice was quiet, but steady. "I didn't tell her to say it." "You didn't have to," Claire hissed. "You've been planting yourself in her life, making her trust you, making her throat closed around the word, making her love you." Andrew's expression softened. "And that's the crime. That she loves me. Claire, she deserves to know who I am. You don't get to just show up after 8 years and claim her." "I'm not claiming anything," Andrew said, his voice breaking despite himself. "I'm asking. I'm begging. Let me be her father." Claire's breath came fast and shallow. She wanted to scream at him, to slam the door in his face, to protect the world she had built. But Madison's voice still echoed in her ears. "Did you see that, Dad?" And it was a truth she couldn't silence. That night, Claire sat by Madison's bedside, watching her sleep. Her little hand clutched the stuffed rabbit. Her lips parted in a soft sigh. Innocent, trusting. Claire brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, whispering, "I just want you safe." But safe didn't always mean happy. And Madison was happy when Andrew was around. The realization gutted her. Across town, Andrew stood on his balcony again, the city sprawling beneath him. But tonight, it wasn't the skyline he sit, was Madison's face. Alight with pride, calling him Dad. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. For 2 days, Claire avoided Andrew's calls. She ignored the texts that came through, each one short and restrained. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Please let me explain. I only want to do right by her." She didn't answer. She couldn't, but Madison was less easily distracted. At breakfast, she pushed her cereal around with her spoon, her usual chatter gone. "Mum," she said finally, "why can't he come over?" Claire closed her eyes. "Because things between me and him are complicated." "But it's not between you and him," Madison insisted. "It's between me and him, too. And I like him." Claire felt the ground shifting beneath her. Madison had never spoken with such certainty before. It wasn't a passing crush or idle curiosity her daughter wanted. Andrew in her life, and Claire realized she had a choice. Slam the door and risk Madison resenting her, or open it just enough to see if Andrew could handle the responsibility he claimed to want. That afternoon, she called him. Her voice was cold, controlled. "If you want to see her, it will be on my terms. Supervised. You don't get to swoop in and out. You show up, consistently, or not at all." Andrew's relief was audible. "I'll do whatever you say." "Don't thank me," Claire snapped. "Thank Madison. This is for her." Andrew nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Understood." The following weekend, he arrived at their house, not in his sleek sedan, but in a borrowed SUV filled with supplies. He looked almost comically out of place, carrying board games, a soccer ball, even a box of chocolate chip cookies. Madison squealed. "You brought cookies?" Andrew grinned, kneeling to her level. "I heard they're your favorite." Claire stood in the doorway, arms folded, skeptical. She expected him to check his watch, to answer a call, to seem distracted. But Andrew's phone stayed in his pocket. His eyes stayed on Madison. They spent the afternoon playing board games at the kitchen table, Andrew fumbling through the rules, while Madison laughed at his mistakes. He chased her in the backyard with a soccer ball, letting her win every goal. When she fell in the grass, he brushed dirt from her elbow with surprising gentleness. Claire watched from the porch, her chest tight. He wasn't the man she remembered, the one who had chosen work over love, ambition over family. Or maybe he was, but trying desperately to be something more, and Madison's laughter made it harder and harder to ignore. By the second weekend, Andrew was back again. True to his word, he arrived on time, no phone glued to his ear, no excuses about meetings. He carried a paper bag from the farmer's market, insisting he wanted to cook dinner. "You cook?" Claire raised an eyebrow as she let him in. Andrew gave a sheepish smile. "Don't look so surprised. I've survived without a personal chef before." In the kitchen, he fumbled with chopping vegetables, cutting the carrots unevenly and nearly slicing his thumb. Madison giggled so hard she nearly fell off her stool. "You're worse than me," she exclaimed. Andrew laughed, surrendering the knife. "Okay, maybe you're the chef. I'll be your assistant." For the first time, Claire saw her daughter command him with playful authority, telling him to stir slower. Add more salt, taste the sauce. And Andrew obeyed without complaint, delight written all over his face. Dinner was a mess burnt around the edges. Too salty, but Madison declared it the best ever. Claire couldn't deny the glow in her daughter's cheeks as she sat between them, her small hands resting trustingly in theirs. Later that evening, after Madison was tucked into bed, Claire found Andrew lingering in the living room. He wasn't scrolling through emails or taking calls. He was looking at the photos on the wall, Madison's first day of kindergarten, Halloween costumes, art projects pinned in cheap frames. "You did all this alone," he said softly. Claire folded her arms, defensive. "I didn't have a choice." Andrew turned to her, his eyes raw. "I should have been here." The words cut deep, not because they were false, but because they were true. Claire wanted to tell him it was too late, that sorry wasn't enough. But then Madison stirred in her room, mumbling in her sleep, and Claire bit the words back. She didn't trust Andrew. Not yet, but Madison. Madison already did. The next day, Andrew showed up with a stack of children's books under his arm. "For bedtime," he explained awkwardly. Claire narrowed her eyes. "This isn't about buying her love." Andrew shook his head. "No, it's about showing up." That night, Claire listened from the doorway as Andrew read aloud, stumbling over silly voices, pausing when Madison corrected him. She laughed so freely, curling against his side, her eyelids drooping halfway through the story. Andrew glanced up once, catching Claire's eyes across the room. There was no smugness in his look, no triumph, just quiet gratitude, and that, somehow, was harder to resist. But doubt still clung to Claire like a shadow. After Andrew left, she sat at the table, head in her hands. He was trying, she could admit that much. He was patient, gentle, even funny. Madison adored him already, so why couldn't she let go of the past? Why couldn't she trust that this change was real, and not another mask he wore until something more important called him away? She closed her eyes, exhaustion pressing down. The truth was simple and terrifying. If Andrew left again, it wouldn't just break her, it would break Madison. And that was a risk she wasn't sure she could take. The first test came sooner than either of them expected. It was a Thursday evening. Claire was in the kitchen, finishing up paperwork from the clinic, while Madison sat at the table drawing. She had been unusually quiet all afternoon, her cheeks flushed, her little hands resting limply on the crayons. "Sweetheart, are you feeling okay?" Claire asked, pressing a hand to her forehead. The heat beneath her palm made her heart lurch. Madison swayed a little in her chair. "I'm just tired." Claire didn't hesitate. She scooped her daughter into her arms, already running through her medical training. Fever, fatigue. She reached for the phone to call her sister. But before she could dial, headlights swept across the window. Andrew, he was early, planning to drop off a new book for bedtime. But when he saw Claire standing in the doorway with Madison pale against her shoulder, his entire body stiffened. "What happened?" His voice was sharp, urgent. "She's burning up," Claire said. "I need to get her to the hospital. I'll drive." Claire wanted to argue, to insist she had it handled. But Madison whimpered softly, her small arms tightening around her mother's neck. And there was no time for pride. "Fine," Claire said, pushing past him. "Let's go." The ride to the ER was tense, Andrew gripping the wheel as if his sheer will could part traffic. Claire sat in the back seat, cradling Madison, whispering reassurances into her damp hair. "It's okay, baby. We're almost there." Andrew kept glancing at them in the mirror, his jaw clenched. He had closed billion-dollar deals, navigated corporate crisis, but nothing had ever terrified him like the sight of his daughter sick and fragile in her mother's arms. When they arrived, Andrew didn't hesitate. He scooped Madison into his arms, carrying her through the automatic doors as Claire rushed beside him. For once, they moved in perfect sync, two halves of the same instinct. Protect her. Hours later, the crisis eased. Madison was tucked into a hospital bed, for dripping steadily, her fever finally breaking. Claire sat at her side, exhaustion etched into her face. Andrew stood across from her, watching his daughter's chest rise and fall with steady breaths. "She's going to be okay," Claire murmured, brushing Madison's hair back. Andrew nodded, swallowing hard. "I've never been so scared in my life." Claire looked up at him, startled by the naked honesty in his voice. He wasn't the unshakable CEO right now. He was just a man terrified of losing his child. For a moment, the years between them fell away. For a moment, she remembered why she had loved him once, long after midnight. When Madison finally drifted into deeper sleep, Claire and Andrew sat together in the dim hospital room. The silence wasn't hostile this time. It was heavy, complicated, but not hopeless, Claire whispered. "If you want to be her father, this is what it means. Showing up when it's hard, staying when it's scary." Andrew met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then I'll stay. Whatever it takes." And for the first time, Claire didn't immediately doubt him. The days after Madison's hospital scare felt different. Something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. For the first time in years, Claire didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of parenthood alone. Andrew didn't vanish once the crisis passed. He stayed, He picked up takeout when Claire was too exhausted to cook, read bedtime stories until his voice cracked, and learned the delicate art of braiding Madison's hair with predictably disastrous but hilarious results. One Saturday morning, Claire found him on the porch, helping Madison build a crooked birdhouse. His expensive watch sat forgotten on the railing, his hands covered in wood glue, his laugh unguarded as Madison bossed him around like a tiny foreman. Claire leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "Didn't know carpentry was in your resume?" Andrew looked up, grinning sheepishly. "Turns out I'm better at mergers than measuring tape." Madison held up the lopsided creation proudly. "It's perfect." And Claire had to admit kind of was. At school pickup, Andrew started showing up too. The first time, other parents whispered, some recognizing him from magazine covers or business features. But Andrew didn't seem to notice. He knelt on the sidewalk, listening as Madison chattered about her day, hanging on every word as if she were the CEO of the world. Claire watched from the car, torn between irritation and something dangerously close to admiration. She had demanded consistency, and Andrew was delivering. Every day, without excuse. One evening, after Madison had gone to bed, Claire found him still lingering in the living room. He sat on the floor, surrounded by crayons and construction paper, the remnants of an art project scattered around him. "Shouldn't you be at some gala tonight?" she asked, leaning on the doorway. He looked up, smiling softly. "This is better." For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy like it once was. It was almost easy, but ease scared Claire more than tension, because ease meant she was lowering her guard. The next weekend, Madison had another game. The sky was bright, the bleachers packed. This time, Andrew sat beside Claire, not across the field. The nearness was strange, almost intimate, though their arms never touched. When Madison hit her first home run, she sprinted across the bases, breathless, beaming. She ran straight to the fence, where both her parents stood side by side. "Did you see that, Dad?" she shouted, grinning wide. This time, she didn't flinch. She didn't correct herself. The word hung in the air, undeniable, irrevocable. Andrew's eyes glistened as he nodded. "I saw, sweetheart. I saw everything." Claire's chest tightened. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Madison had chosen. And maybe, just maybe, Claire could choose to. The following Monday, Andrew's world collided with his old life. His assistant called twice during breakfast, her voice tense over voicemail. "The Tokyo deal is collapsing. We need you here. Boardroom in 20 minutes. Andrew stared at the phone as if it were a loaded weapon. He had spent years living for that tone of urgency, chasing it like oxygen. Deals didn't wait. Empires didn't pause. But across the table, Madison was carefully spooning yogurt into her bowl, humming off-key. She looked up at him, her smile small but trusting. "Are you staying for drop-off today?" she asked. Andrew hesitated. The words stuck in his throat. For a split second, he felt the old reflex. To explain, to excuse, to promise next time. But he saw Claire watching him from the sink, her expression unreadable. Maybe she was waiting for him to fail, to prove her right. Andrew silenced the phone and slid it into his pocket. "Yeah, I'm staying." Madison's grin lit up the room. "Good." At school, Andrew walked her to the gate. She squeezed his hand before running inside, her backpack bouncing. He stood there long after she disappeared into the building. Feeling the ghost of her tiny grip in his palm, Claire approached, her arms folded. That was Tokyo, wasn't it? He met her eyes. It can wait. She searched his face, almost disbelieving. You never said those words before. Andrew exhaled, a long, unsteady breath. Maybe I should have said them 8 years ago. The test didn't end there. That night, the board sent an ultimatum: fly out within 24 hours or risk losing billions. Andrew read the email in silence, sitting on the couch while Madison colored beside him. She leaned against his shoulder, humming softly, completely unaware of the storm raging in his inbox. He could almost feel the pull, the familiar intoxication of control, power, legacy. Then Madison held up her drawing. Look, it's us. Mum, me, and you. 3 stick figures stood beneath a crooked sun, their hands joined. In shaky letters above, she had written, "My family." Andrew's throat tightened. The decision that once would have taken him seconds now felt like no decision at all. He closed the laptop, shut off the phone, and pulled her into a hug. It's perfect. Later, when Claire found him in the kitchen, she asked carefully, "So, what did you decide?" Andrew's voice was steady, certain. "I already did. I'm not going anywhere." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, God. She did, but belief was dangerous. Still, the way he said it, the way he looked at Madison as though she were the only empire he'd ever need. It was harder than ever to doubt. The days that followed felt strangely ordinary, and maybe that was the miracle. Andrew wasn't swooping in with grand gestures or promises gilded in wealth. He was packing Madison's lunch, fixing a loose bike chain, fumbling through grocery shopping with Claire's handwritten list. One evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Madison lay across Andrew's lap, half asleep, while Claire rocked slowly in the chair beside them. "She's going to remember this," Claire murmured. Andrew looked down at Madison's messy curls, his hand brushing gently across her hair. "So will I." Claire studied him for a long moment. The man beside her wasn't the same one she had walked away from all those years ago. Or maybe he was but stripped of armor, stripped of excuses. "You're different," she whispered. Andrew turned, meeting her gaze head on. "No, I'm just finally becoming who I should have been." The silence between them softened. Claire felt her defenses bending, not shattering all at once, but giving way like ice thawing under spring sun. She thought of the nights alone, the battles fought in silence, the weight of carrying everything on her shoulders. She thought of Madison's laughter, brighter these days, fuller. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was a series of choices, just like love. A week later, Madison stood at the school's family day, proudly dragging both her parents by the hand. "This is my mom," she told her teacher. Then, with a radiant smile, "And this is my dad." No hesitation, no stumble, just truth. Claire's heart clenched. Andrew's fingers brushed against hers where Madison held them together, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. That night, after Madison was asleep, Claire found Andrew lingering on the porch. The air was cool, crickets buzzing in the distance. "She called you Dad again," she said softly. Andrew's smile was small, reverent. "Best word I've ever heard." Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. "Don't make me regret letting you back in." He shook his head, his voice steady. "I won't. Not again. You and Madison. You're it for me." You always were. The sincerity in his eyes left no room for doubt. For the first time in 8 years, Claire allowed herself to believe. Inside, Madison stirred in her sleep, the stuffed rabbit clutched tight. Outside, beneath the quiet night sky, her parents stood side by side, not yet healed, not yet whole, but finally choosing to try. And sometimes that was enough.